The Top Floor Please podcast, where women in leadership rise together. I'm your host, Melissa McCormick, executive coach and founder of the Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. This is your space to find clarity, grow in confidence, and lead with bold authenticity. Whether you're navigating the boardroom, building your team, or stepping into new territory, you're not alone. Let's talk real challenges, real growth, and real leadership because the top floor isn't just a place, it's a mindset. Alrighty then, let's get started.
All right. Welcome back to the Top Floor Please podcast. There's a moment in every leader's career when something shifts again, right? It's no longer about doing your job well. It's no longer just about leading your team well. It's when you begin to think like an owner. Why do I say that? I'm not saying that because you are an owner, because many of the people that are listening to this podcast are not, you don't own the company, but you're taking responsibility for the business as if you were the owner. Make sense? Like you're walking into the company and you happen to see trash on the ground. You pick it up. You're walking down the hall and you hear somebody say something that you can help solve. You stop and help, right? You are thinking as an owner, as an enterprise thinker of what I say, and that's when the shift happens. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McCormick. I'm an executive coach, leadership advisor, and the founder of Grace and Salt Leadership Academy. I work with leaders who are buried in the day-to-day, leaders who are capable, experienced, and trusted, but somewhere along the way, the calendar starts running them instead of the other way around, right? I can help you, if this resonates with you at all, I can help you simplify things, get out of the weeds, and start running the business instead of that business running you. So that's what I do, and I love doing it. Today, we are going to talk about the title of this podcast is why you're not seen as an executive yet. So I'm hoping that kind of grabbed you, and we're going to talk about that throughout this time that we're together. The difference between a leader and an owner. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about. Leaders. Let me just frame this for you. Leaders who don't think like owners. This is some characteristics of them. They focus on their function, so very siloed. They optimize their department over everybody else. They protect their resources when it comes to time to make some difficult decisions or just decisions in general, and there's only so much money and there's only so many people that we can hire, right? They protect their resources. They want to be sure that their department alone is what they are really, really focused on. And the other thing that they do is that they escalate problems. Now, it's okay. So those are leaders who don't think like owners. So they focus on their own function, right? They're siloed. They optimize their department, protect their resources, and escalate problems. But leaders who do think like owners, they think enterprise first. And when I say enterprise, I mean the company, right? They think company first. They balance trade-offs across the organization. They understand that perhaps the service department needs another person now, and I don't necessarily. Like I can wait because this is the bottleneck and this is where it's impacting the customers, right? You're thinking bigger than yourself. They consider the long-term impact, not short-term gain. They solve problems before escalating them. Now, obviously, you do need to be sure that you're giving your executive team you don't want anybody to be blindsided, so you're always making sure they know what's going on. But you're not going to them constantly for a problem unless you've exhausted everything that you possibly can do in order to solve that. So here's the thing. Owners don't ask, is this my responsibility? Like, should I really be doing this? They ask, what does the business need right now? Let me say that again. What does the business need right now? So the moment the shift happens, I can't even really tell you when that happened, but um, I think probably for me personally, it was when we were making some really hard decisions. Um, which happens, right? You're sitting down again. There's only so much money, or maybe revenue's not where it should be, and you got to make some cuts. And you either cut, you either sell more or you cut. Like those are your two options when you're running a business. And if revenue's not coming in the way it is, and you don't have line of sight to increase that, then you got to go to cutting, right? So what are we going to cut? And there was a day when I was like, look, you don't even look at my budget. I would. Yes, I would give it to my boss. He asked for a budget, and then he'd say, where can you cut? I'd trim, but I really was protecting. I wasn't thinking like an owner, I was protecting. Once I realized that, you know what, it's what's good for the company, then that's what I need to do. Even if it's going to, I'm going to have to explain to my team, I'm sorry, but this is what we have to do because it's better for the company. That's when the shift happened. And that's when real leadership happens. You stop thinking about your own role and you start thinking about the business. What impact does it have on the business? So I want to just take you through 3 simple ways that leaders can start thinking like owners. The first one is they think beyond their lane. Owners don't make isolated decisions. Here's what they ask. They say, what does this impact downstream? Like, what is going to, when I make a decision, how is it going to impact others, downstream, upstream, whatever? How is it going to impact others? Who else is affected? Who do I need to communicate with to be sure they're not blindsided? And does this create problems somewhere else? Thinking like an owner means thinking in ripple effects, not silos. Does that make sense? Right? You want to think like what are the ripples that go out by this particular action? Not like I don't even really care what it ripples. This is what I need to do because this is what's going to benefit me and my department the most. No, you're thinking in ripples. Okay, I'm making this decision. This is my action. How is it going to impact others? And quite frankly, who do I need to communicate with once this does happen, right? So that's the first one. They think beyond their lane. And 2, they make decisions with trade-offs in mind. They understand every yes has a cost. Every exception creates precedent. Every decision signals what matters. So guardrails, like we all have guardrails, right? We all have guardrails. Those guardrails can bend, but they need to bend intentionally. It's more about enterprise thinking and not my goals, not my needs, my. In in my book, Grace and Salt, I refer to a leadership style called ego leadership. So I coined that phrase, ego leadership, and I'm referring to someone who leads with their ego and not an enterprise thinker. So, and this is what I'm talking about right now. It's that recognizing that my decisions impact not only others, but the entire organization, the entire company. Precedent will be set. And can we live with that? If we had to do this a second time, could we do it? Right? That's precedent. And if we can't, then should we be doing it at all? Or how do we approach it with the other person so that they know this is not precedent setting? Okay. But odds are, if you're doing it once, you're setting a precedent. So those are things that you need to keep and aware of, just be aware of. So owners don't look for perfect decisions. They make informed trade-offs, right? So I have a decision to make. I'm either doing this or I'm doing this, or it's somewhere in the middle. What does that look like? And you're deciding based on the enterprise. That is owner type leadership. Remember, I don't expect you to be an owner of the company, but I do expect you to think like one. I do expect you to be thinking about the money that you're spending as your own money. If this money were yours, would you spend it accordingly? Those are questions you need to be asking yourself at all times. Now, the third way is that they take responsibility before being asked. Okay. All right. This is a big one. Here's what owners, they step in early. They anticipate problems and they don't wait for direction. They keep questions for listeners, right? So what do I mean by that? I'm sorry. The key questions for listeners, right? Are you waiting to be asked or are you already stepping in? Are you waiting to be asked or are you already stepping in? I'm asking you that, you listener, right? Are you waiting to be asked or are you already stepping in? That's big. So just want to go through these again. Three ways leaders start thinking like owners. One, they think beyond their lane. Two, they make decisions with trade-offs in mind. And three, they take responsibility before being asked. Big. Now, the risk of not thinking like an owner, what does that look like? So some leaders don't make this shift. And when they don't, here's what happens. Silos increase. So what do I mean by silos? We use these terms and we just assume that everybody knows what it means. But silos are where we're only thinking about our department, our function. We're only thinking about finance. We're only thinking about contract administration. We're only thinking about sales. We're only thinking about production. Those are silos thinking. We're only thinking about our world. And so when leaders don't make this shift, silos increase because the decisions they're making are only about their department. Blame increases. There's a lot of throwing the grenade over the wall. You've heard that term, right? We're just going to throw the grenade over the wall and see what happens. Blame increases, right? We're not taking ownership. If you've read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, you should. It's very good and it just is a very good leadership book about how to take ownership and why it's so important. And so he is a veteran and was one of the, I don't want to, well, here's this book right here. I have all these. Whoops, I just dropped all my books. But anyway, yeah, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. That is his book. It's very good. But my point is that silos increase, blame increase, decision making slows down, executives lose confidence in their readiness. Executives lose confidence in the leader's readiness, which means you're going to sit on the sidelines. You are not going to be invited into the table. They don't see you. The executives don't see you as being somebody, and they don't see you in their mind's eye visually sitting at the table sharing because you're so egocentric and so protective of your fiefdom, if you will. Right? Leaders who don't think like owners stall. And usually it's at the director level. Like that's where you're going to tap out right there. So I've got some questions for you that I want you to think about today. One is, do you primarily think about your department or the organization? Do you bring problems or solutions with trade-offs? Do you consider downstream impact before making decisions? Would executives trust you with broader responsibility today? Things to think about. I want you to think about that and really look in the mirror because it's really difficult. You're listening to this podcast or you're watching it on YouTube or however you take in your leadership development. And you might just go, what are you talking about? No, I don't do that. Well, you're listening to this podcast for a reason. And I don't know what that reason is, whether that's for you personally or whether that's for a friend. I don't know. But I do want you to look in the mirror. So, okay, before we close today, I just want to leave you with one question to think about. If the executive team were making a high stakes decision, would they think to include you? What do you think they would say? Like if they had to, times were a little tougher for for a certain organization and they needed to lay off people and they wanted your opinion or it impacted your department. Would your boss bring you into the discussion or would your boss make the decision for you? That's really what we're talking about. Being seen as an executive isn't about how well you manage your role. It's about whether others trust how you think beyond your role. Now, granted, yes, do you have to perform? Yes, of course you do. But it isn't about performing well, honestly. It's about thinking beyond your role. Do you know how many times have you seen a really good salesperson get promoted to sales manager and then a year later they're back into the sales role? Because they were not, we promote people who perform well, but should we? I'm not saying that any of those decisions are bad, but they might be, right? They might be. So as you get up further and further into the organization, again, it's not about performance per se. It's about how you think beyond your own role. Are you capable of thinking of enterprise thinking, company thinking, bigger than yourselves? Because the leaders who move into executive positions are rarely the ones working the hardest. They're the ones thinking differently. They think beyond their department. They make decisions with the whole organization in mind. And they take responsibility before they're asked to. They take responsibility before they're asked to. So when I was talking about Jocko's book on executive ownership, that's about taking ownership of something, whether that's a result, whether that's good, whether it's bad, whatever. I'm also talking about taking responsibility, like there is something that needs to be done, and so you go ahead and take it as long as it makes sense and you're not stepping on anybody's toes. There is a political dynamic that we haven't even talked about within this podcast, but that aside, hopefully you understand how that works. If you're interested in me going into that, I would love to talk about politics in companies and how to navigate them without violating your values, okay, without being seen as manipulative and all of those types of things. But taking a responsibility, you're in a meeting, you're taking responsibility of something. Somebody says, "Hey, this is what we need to do," and the you have the skill set to do it. They trust you. You feel like, and you raise your hand. Yeah, hey, I got that. My department can do that. We can do that without, again, you're not stepping on anybody else's toes. If you're not seen as an executive yet, it's not a gap in capability. Now, I don't know you, but I'm just going to guess. I'm going to go out on a limb. It's not a gap in your capability. It's a shift in perspective. You want to go from managing your function to leading the business. Doesn't mean you ignore your function. It just means that when you're in those discussions, you're thinking about the greater good and not so much about you. So, in our next episode, we're going to take this one step further and we're going to talk about what it actually takes to earn a seat at the executive table. We're doing that because being seen as an executive is one thing, but being trusted with that level of leadership, well, now that's another. So, if today's conversation resonated with you at all, here are 3 things I'd invite you to do. First, I want you to subscribe. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode in our series. And second, share this episode with a leader who's ready for the next level. Finally, third thing, if something from today stood out to you, send me a message and let me know. I always appreciate hearing how these conversations show up in your leadership. I am passionate for just helping others and developing leaders at all levels, because leadership at an executive level isn't about doing more. It's about thinking differently, showing others you're ready to lead at that level. That is critical. So here's the question I want you to consider. If you were the owner of the business, what would you do differently this week? How are you going to show up? All right, everyone. It's been great being here with you today. I wish you the best day ever, and be sure to keep leading with grace and salt.
Thanks so much for hanging out on the top floor. If today's episode gave you something to think about or a little boost, share it with your friends to keep the momentum going. And hey, if you're ready to rise, find your voice, and lead with clarity and confidence, we'd love to connect with you. Reach out at graceandsaltleadership.com to learn how Grace and Salt can support your growth. Remember, you don't have to lead like everyone else. Just lead like you. All right, I'll see you next time on the top floor.